So in this segment, I'm going to talk about a show that's been on the air for a long time. And I'm going to tell you about the seasons, kind of give you an overview of the plot, and then we're going to rank the seasons from best to worst. This month's show is Outlander. We were talking about Outlander, and we're going to go ahead and upfront go spoiler alert. Honey, we are spoiling shit. So if you want to watch Outlander, maybe mute the chat or mute the stream. To be honest, most of what I talk about are just the high level plot points throughout the show. There is a lot of shit that happens in this show that I am not going to even mention tonight. So even if you watch the show tonight, even if you listen to the podcast, you could probably still watch Outlander and still like love it, because there's just so much. There's so much that happens. I gloss over a lot. Let's dive right in. Season 1. We open on Claire Randall in 1945, just after she just got done serving as an army nurse for the Second World War in England. She and her husband, Frank Randall, who is a historian, visit Scotland on holiday. She finds herself at these strange stones in Inverness, which is a town in Scotland, and she touches the stones, and she's suddenly transported 200 years in the past. There, she meets Jamie Fraser and the Highlanders, and she's forced to marry Jamie and fit in with 18th century Scotland. She and Jamie unexpectedly fall madly in love with each other. Jamie is a wanted man by the British Army, particularly the sadistic monster Jack Randall, who henceforth I'm going to refer to as Evil Jack because he's a son of a bitch. And funny enough, he is a direct descendant of her present day husband, Frank Randall, and it's actually played by the same actor, so they looked identical. Evil Jack becomes obsessed with Claire and Jamie, and he actually captures Claire, which prompts Jamie to offer himself in exchange for Claire's freedom. After Jamie does that, he is brutally assaulted physically, mentally, and sexually by Evil Jack for days until Claire and the Highlanders arrive to save him, and they presumably kill Evil Jack by having him trampled by sheep. LOL. Jamie is severely traumatized by this, but after Claire warns him that the impending Battle of Culloden, which is a historical battle that actually happened, is going to mark the end of the Highlanders, Jamie vows to somehow stop the battle and save his kinsmen. And that's kind of where season 1 ends. Season 1 was really fucking good. Like all of the shit I just told you was like maybe some details sprinkled in episodes, but oh my god, it's like 14 episodes. It's gonna blow your mind how much shit happens in this one season. This season like really like put me onto this show. The only reason I watched this show back in 2022, the first season, and I was hooked. But sadly the second season, which we'll get to in a minute, like had kind of a rocky start, and it kind of made me fall off the show. But this was so damn good. Oh my god, you fall in love with Claire. She's a great protagonist. She's very strong-willed and independent and smart as hell. And her time as a nurse in the army makes it so that she has like healing abilities. So she's kind of takes on a role as a healer in Scotland back then, like teaching them about like really simple shit like germs and shit, because it's the 1700s. I don't know about germs, but like what the hell are germs? So you also fall in love with Jamie, who is brave and young and so head fast and headstrong, and he is head over heels in love with Claire. It is so fucking sweet. Something else that really pulled me into this show was the fact that, so it's a Showtime show, and if you guys know, Showtime and HBO shows are like all full of sex. This show's no different. The difference with this show is that like every single sex scene, every single consensual sex scene is designed for women to enjoy them. Like this show is written off of a book series by Diana Gabaldon, and she's a woman that writes sex scenes for women, and it fucking shows. So this is a very solid number 1. Like this is the jumpstart into the series. This will get you hooked, guarantee it. And I didn't even really spoil a thing. Let's move on to season 2. Season 2, Claire and Jamie arrive in Paris to begin a secret campaign to prevent the Battle of Culloden from happening by sabotaging the Bonnie Prince Charles's desperate attempts to raise funds for the war so his father can reclaim the English throne. We find out that Claire is pregnant, which is a happy occasion for both Claire and Jamie. Jamie is still deeply traumatized by his time with Evil Jack, but he feels comforted knowing that Evil Jack is dead. Or is he? Dun dun dun. We actually find out that Evil Jack indeed survived, and he's in Paris too for some reason, and he's visiting his dying brother in Paris. That's the reason why he's in Paris, which is still kind of a coincidence, but whatevs. So when Jamie finds this out, he vows to kill Evil Jack the next time he sees them. But Claire begs him, please, Jamie, don't kill him. He needs to survive at least up until the Battle of Culloden so that Frank's direct ancestor can be born, right? So Jamie really tries his hardest to not fucking murder this guy. But he actually catches Evil Jack sexually assaulting James Young Ward, who's a little boy. His name is Fergus, and Jamie took him on as his ward. And fucking Evil Jack is a goddamn monster, and he was sexually assaulting him. So Jamie was just like, okay, dude, you're gonna die now. So Jamie challenges Jack to a duel. And when Claire finds out, she tries to stop them and she miscarries. She miscarries their child. Jamie actually doesn't end up killing Evil Jack in that duel, but he does shoot him in the dick, which I thought was hilarious. Wrought with grief, Jamie and Claire return to Scotland, having failed to prevent the Battle of Culloden from happening because Bonnie Prince Charles ended up making the money instead. So they know that it's full steam ahead, it's gonna happen, and they find out Claire's pregnant again. So Jamie forces Claire to go back through the stones to safety, because if she stays in the present, if she stays in the past and the Battle of Culloden happens, she's probably going to be killed, and her baby too. So he forces her to go through the stones, and it's a really heartfelt scene, them saying goodbye to each other because she knows that she needs to go, but she doesn't want to because she loves him so much. But she goes through the stones and she returns to the present. When she returns to the present, she's been missing for 2 years. She just disappeared, remember, right? And she's been gone for 2 whole years. And now she comes back and she's wearing these strange clothes from the past, and she's extremely pregnant. So Frank, her present day husband, knowing that it's another man's child, agrees to take her and move them both back to America to settle, loving the child as his own. Claire is unbelievably heartbroken because she feels that she left the love of her life to die, and she's kind of consigned to that fact, and she feels like her mission in life now is to just raise the child, their baby. This was a rocky start, I'm not gonna lie. It was a little bit boring when they first got to Paris, and that's actually why I originally fell off. But the show actually this season really picks up a few episodes in, and it ends up being so fucking good. Seeing Jamie deal with the trauma that he experienced with Evil Jack from the last season, it was really big for his own character development. It really put a lot of layers and maturity on him as a character. Also, the couple experiencing that tragedy of losing a child really solidified their relationship. You know, it felt like in season 1, it was very cute, their relationship, where they were just like, oh, I love you, oh, I love you, oh, I love you, we're in love, oh, blah, 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 like that. It was very honeymoony. But them sharing this tragedy in season 2 really brought depth to their relationship, and it just solidified it, and it was really, really cool to see that, because honestly, from this moment on, you really kind of never doubt their love, as if you doubted it before. And I honestly cried my fucking eyes out. Oh my god, in the scene where Jamie and Claire are saying goodbye to each other. It's a long scene. It's like something like 7 or 8 minutes long, and they don't want to leave each other, and they're just telling each other, and they're just like holding each other and kissing each other and knowing that this is goodbye, because Jamie thinks he's gonna die and Claire thinks he's gonna die, and they're like, we're never gonna see each other again. And it was, oh my god, they acted the fuck out of that scene. They acted the fuck out of that scene. This season would very nearly be number 2 on my list if it was not for a later season. This season was so strong, but there is another season later that is stronger, and that's why this is number 3 on my list. Season 3, we begin the season following Claire in the 20 years after she came back to her present. She has her baby shortly after coming back, and she names the baby Brianna, or Bree, after Jamie's father, Brian, but Frank doesn't know that. She tries to live her life as a housewife, but quickly went, fuck that, and then went to med school to become a surgeon instead, which, badass Claire, love her. She and Frank are intensely unhappy in their marriage, despite really trying to be married and trying to be parents to Bree. But Frank, for one, is, like I've mentioned, he's played by the same actor as Evil Jack, so he unintentionally repulses her every time he tries to touch her. Like she cannot unsee Evil Jack's face in him because they look the fucking same. So that's part of it. She doesn't even want to touch him. And number 2, she's very obviously in love with someone else, like, you know. if you're in a relationship and you know that other person's heart is not in it, you know. And as a result, Frank is super unhappy and he's really lonely. And he actually asks her for divorce eventually. 20 years later, he asks her for divorce. Unfortunately, right after he did that, he was killed in a car accident. Really tragic. Bree is grown now. She's a grown woman now. She's in college going to college for history because she really respects her father. Frank is the only father she ever knew. So she loves her father so dearly, and she is devastated when Frank is killed in a car accident. Her being a historian, she finds out that her parents were lying to her whole life about Claire going back in the past for 2 years, or in his eyes, disappearing for 2 years. So when she finds that out and she realizes Frank wasn't even her father, she digs deeper and she employs the help of a man named Roger. And Roger was a little boy living in this living with this minister that took Claire in when she first came back to the present. So basically, like, Claire came back to the present and this minister took her in to like let her live there until Frank got there. So that's how Roger is involved in this. Roger's now grown too. So they find out that Jamie survived. Jamie didn't die in the Battle of Culloden. And they found like documents saying like where he was. And when they tell Claire about that, Claire decides, yeah, fuck the present, I'm going back to my man. And she goes back to the past to go try to find Jamie. So let's put a pause in that story for now. Let's flash back to the Battle of Culloden, which failed, as Claire said it would. Jamie accepted that he was gonna die because the love of his life is gone. So he's like, I don't fucking care about life anymore. So he went to the battle fully expecting to die. And he killed Evil Jack. That was so satisfying to see Evil Jack just get stabbed in the fucking, the gut. I thought I already had enough satisfaction seeing him get shot in the dick, but getting him stabbed, that was just, oh my God, that was such sweet release. After the battle, Jamie was badly wounded. He and the other Highlanders that fought in the Battle of Culloden are branded as traitors to the crown. So they are all transported to a prison called Ardsmuir. And in that prison, Jamie kind of gets a lot of respect from the prisoners. They see him as a Macdu, which is kind of like royalty. Like they kind of just dub him their leader. And he actually also gets very close to the warden of the prison, who was a redcoat officer named John Grey that he actually met much earlier in the series, but that's a detail I'm going to leave out so you guys can watch the show. You guys like that one. So because he befriended John Grey had connections with some wealthy benefactors, and he actually got Jamie out of prison, and he got him a position in a fancy mansion as a groom, which is kind of a valet. Like, it's just a guy that serves the master of the house. He's manipulated or more coerced into conceiving a son with the daughter of the house. Pretty much he said, if you don't fuck me, I'm gonna get you fired. And he's just like, well, best we get fucking. So they conceive a son, and the son's name is Willie, but the son can never know that Jamie is his real father. And Jamie actually got to raise the son a little bit for the first 6 years of his life, but they decided that Jamie needed to leave at that point, because eventually the son was gonna start looking in the mirror and then looking at Jamie and going, something ain't right here. So they decided that Jamie should leave. So Jamie is eventually pardoned totally, and he finds work as a printer in Edinburgh. One day he's working in his shop, and a familiar face appears in his shop. And he and Claire are finally reunited after 20 years. Jamie didn't think he'd ever see her again. I cried. He actually fainted. He fainted at the sight of her. It was adorable. Excuse me. So that's actually all of what I just said happened in the first fucking 7 episodes of the fucking season. There was another 7 episodes. There was an entire arc. This is when it went off the rails. This is why this season kind of gets a little bit lower on the list, because it was great up to that point. But then after this, there's a whole arc where Jamie's son, Ian, gets kidnapped by pirates, and Jamie and Claire have to cross the ocean to Jamaica to go get Ian back and buy him back from slavery. And then Claire got kidnapped at some point by a different ship, and then she jumps overboard in the middle of the ocean and floats to a random island and almost dies from exposure. And then Jamie's ship just happened to land on that island, and save her. And then after they save young Ian, their ship gets into a storm, and Jamie and Claire get jettisoned off overboard again in the middle of the ocean in the middle of a storm, but they survive somehow and wash up on the shores of North Carolina. And then they were just like, shit, I guess we live in North Carolina about it now. It was just weird. It was a weird choice. It went off the rails at the second half of that season. So that's why I love Jamie's story. Like, I think Claire's story was actually a little bit boring in the season, but I think her story, really the purpose of it was to introduce Bree and Roger, because they actually become regular characters later in the series. So I think that was really the point of Claire's story. Jamie's story was so good. Jamie's story was so fucking good. Like, oh my God. It was so nice to see Jack Randall get fucking killed. But that whole pirate arc was ridiculous. Oh my God. So because of that, the whole latter half of the season was like just laughably bad. I had to put the season at number 5. Oh God, it just went off the rails. But moving on to season 4. We open on Claire and Jamie now settling in the new world, as Jamie is granted 10,000 acres of land in North Carolina, and it's called Fraser's Ridge. So they're in America now. They help a man named Stephen Bonnet escape execution, only for that man to betray and rob them of everything that they have, including Claire's wedding ring. Keep that in mind. In the present, Bree and Roger begin to date, but Roger totally freaks Bree out because he asked her to marry him after like dating for 2 months because they wanted to fuck. And he said, I can't have sex until we get married. So can you marry me? And Bree was like, no. So they broke up. Roger, being a historian himself, finds out that Claire and Jamie died in a fire only a couple of years after Claire returned to him. So he finds out that he wanted to tell Bree about this, but he actually found out she already knew. And she already went through the stones to the past to try to warn her mother. So Roger has the ability to go through the stones as well. I'm not going to tell you why. Go ahead and watch the show so you can find out why. So he follows her through the stones. Bree is able to make it to the New World pretty quickly, because remember, the stones are in Scotland. So when they go through the stones, they're in Scotland. So they have to find a way to get to the Americas from then in 1769. Like, it's not easy. But Bree actually makes it over there pretty quickly because she's able to find her Jamie's sister and brother-in-law. And tell them, hey, I'm your niece, and then they give her a bunch of money, so she's able to get over pretty safely. Roger, however, didn't think things through and went to the past with no money, so he had to sell himself into indentured servitude to none other than Stephen fucking Bonnet, because Stephen Bonnet is a pirate and owns a ship, so he's under Stephen Bonnet's employ. He finds out that Bonnet is a total monster. A total fucking monster. Apparently there was one person on the ship that had the pox, and he threw her overboard. Then he decided, if anybody on this ship has so much of a fucking sniffle, they are getting thrown overboard. And he just starts throwing passengers overboard. And Roger finds like a young woman and a small child who happens to have the same last name as him. They're from the same clan. So he's just like, he tries to save her and hide her under the ship, and it gets him in trouble with Stephen Bonnet. So he's got bad blood with Stephen Bonnet. When they land, Roger and Bree reunite, and they actually marry hand-fast. And hand-fast is kind of a temporary marriage. You're legally married in the eyes of God for a year, but you have that year in order to get into in front of a priest and make it official. And they finally fuck. They sleep together for the first time because now they're married. Right after that happens, though, Bree and Roger get into a huge fight because Roger's just like, okay, Bree, let's go the fuck back to the present. The past is dangerous. We shouldn't be here. And Bree's just like, no, I have to warn my mom. She's gonna die. And then they get into a big fight and they separate. So after that happens, Bree goes into a bar and she actually finds Stephen Bonnet playing around with her mother's wedding ring. Remember, he stole it from her. She tries to buy it back from him, but he's a son of a bitch, and he actually brutally rapes her and gives her the ring as quote-unquote payment. It's a really fucked up scene. She finally, after this happens, the next day, really fucked up thing happens. She does finally run into Jamie, and she tells him who he is, and that moment made me cry. It was just so beautiful. So beautiful, because Jamie's sitting here thinking, I'm never gonna see my daughter. Like, I can only rely on what Claire tells me. And he saw his daughter for the first time. He saw his face and his daughter's face, and it was so beautiful. And they reunite with Claire too. It's a really touching moment. Roger tries to find Bree at the same time, like pretty much like that next morning, but Stephen Bonnet forces him back on the ship to finish his servitude. So it's not even, it's like a couple of more months later before Roger can even, he has to sail all the way up to Pennsylvania and then find his way all the way back down to North Carolina. Like, it takes a couple more months. Unfortunately, due to a misunderstanding, when Roger finally makes it to Fraser's Ridge, Jamie mistakenly thinks that Roger is the one that raped Bree. And he beats the shit out of Roger and has him sold into slavery with the Mohawk Native Americans. When Bree finally tells Jamie of his mistake, Jamie and Claire and Jamie's nephew Ian travel, the one that got kidnapped by pirates, travel all the way up to upstate New York to get Roger back. Meanwhile, Bree is pregnant. And she does not know if the father is Bonnet's or Roger's, and she kind of thinks it might be Bonnet's because Roger pulled out, Bonnet didn't. So she visits Bonnet in prison, he's imprisoned again because he's about to get executed again because he's a fucking bastard. And she tells him off, but she also informs him of his child, kind of like to spite him a little bit, like, just, I guess, does it bring you comfort knowing that there is something that's going to be in the world after you're gone? That was kind of her her philosophy for that. Ian up in New York trades himself to the Mohawk in Roger's place, and then Roger is finally able to be reunited with Bree. He vows to love that boy, Jimmy, that baby boy, as his own, whether it's his or not. This season was so good. This season was so fucking good. This is the reason why season 2 is not number 2 on this list, because this season is number 2. I was engaged every second of this season. The only reason why it's not number 1 is because season 1 is number 1. So this is the season to watch. This is the season, like, watch this show so that you can get to the season. Okay. Season 5. We open on Bree. By the way, there's 6 seasons, and season 6 is like halfway done right now. Okay. Season 5, we open on Bree and Roger's wedding. So they're finally married for real. A rebel group called the Regulators, which is a group of Scottish settlers in the New World, begins rebelling against the Redcoat occupation due to unfair taxes. Jamie is tasked by the governor, the Redcoat governor, with amassing a militia amongst Fraser's Ridge to quell the rebellion. Claire tells Jamie about the impending Revolutionary War that's about to happen, and he warns them that they maybe don't want to be on Britain's side when that happens. So keeping that in mind, Jamie helps the Redcoats for the time being, but in the back of his mind, he's like, we're not going to be on their side much longer. So Roger and Bree think that they are unable to go through the stones that go back to the present because Jimmy's now here. They're afraid that Jimmy, the baby, won't be able to go through the stones. So like if they try to, maybe Jimmy just gets left behind on the ground or something. So they would just decide, okay, we just live here now. The group finds out that Bonnet is still alive. He evaded execution yet again, and they decide, yeah, we need to kill this motherfucker. So Bonnet, now exonerated, has begun amassing influence in North Carolina, and he intends to claim Jimmy as his own son because Jamie's aunt Jocasta, who owns this huge plantation and all this wealth, has signed all of her wealth in her will and made Jimmy the heir. So now Bonnet's like, oh, I want that shit, so I'm gonna make him my son. So the group are like, no, that's not happening. So they're finally, the whole arc happens, I won't spoil it, but they are able to finally kick his fucking ass and doom him to be executed via drowning, which is actually his greatest fear. So that was great poetic justice. However, Bree shoots the fucker in the head anyway, so that's pretty poggers. By the end of the season, Jamie's militia has successfully quelled the Regulators at the cost of the life of Jamie's godfather and best friend. I won't say who that is because I think that'd be something that you guys should watch. Jamie declares his loyalty to the crown as over. He has no more loyalty to the crown. He is a free man living in a free nation. After the battle, Claire is okay. This is the reason why because this season was actually pretty good, but this little thing I'm going to tell you right now is what put this season so fucking low on this list for me. After the battle happens, this is the last episode of the season, Claire is suddenly kidnapped by a band of men because she had been publishing articles under a pseudonym teaching women how to prevent pregnancy, among other things too. Like, it wasn't just that, like, it was also like how to keep your hands clean, wash your hands, there's germs, but it was also telling women about their cycles and how they can prevent pregnancy. And the men of the area did not take kindly to that and decided the way to punish her was to brutally beat and gang rape her, which I will get to this in a minute. I have huge problems with how this show treats rape. We will talk about it in a minute. But basically, the men of Fraser's Ridge all fucking killed every one of those guys, which was actually a badass fucking scene. They were all like suiting up and shit, getting all badass. We're like, we're gonna fucking kill them. And they killed every last one of them, which was awesome. But this whole ordeal left Claire intensely traumatized, which of course it fucking would. The season was great, honestly. Like, seeing Bree and Roger adjust as new parents in the 18th century was really cool as a development in their own arcs. Like, they're young people coming to the past and trying to like survive back here and not knowing, I guess, the rules, you know? Like, there's actually a point, like, you remember that young mother that Roger tried to save on the ship? He actually comes across her again during that battle with the regulators, because that young mother's husband is one of the regulators. So he tried to warn her, be like, hey, this battle is not going to go in your favor. You guys need to get out of here. And he got too familiar with her because he wasn't familiar with the rules of the time. So he gave her a hug. Her husband saw him hug her, got pissed, and then dressed him up like a regulator. And then he actually got hanged. The Redcoats hung him as an example, thinking he was one of the regulators. But before he died, they were like Bree and Claire and Jamie were able to cut him down in time. But it left him traumatized as fuck because he almost died. He had a near-death experience. And that was a really, really like intense couple of episodes surrounding Roger and his own growth and really adjusting to the time. The emotional beats were really hit here. But that last episode killed it for me. Small tangent, this show, and this is a content warning, guys. I love this show. My biggest beef with this show is that it is far too liberal with its use of rape. And to the point where like every time, like I get it, it's a product of its time, as in like the 18th century was not a good place for women to be in. It happened. I know that, I acknowledge that, but I think that this show uses it as a plot device for the wrong reasons. Like, I understand that they had Bree sexually assaulted. I know why they did that. They did that to start the whole drama with who's the baby's father. I get it. That's for the narrative, right? This happening to Claire didn't need to fucking happen. This wasn't even the first time that character's been raped in this fucking show. Like, so why the fuck do this to leave her traumatized? She's already traumatized. Shit. Like, there's just no reason. I was so fucking mad. Like, why the fuck? Like, it just, the whole season was great up until that point. It was like the last, 30 minutes of the last episode. I don't fucking know. It was very lazy. I agree. It's very lazy. So anyway, that's my tangent. This is number 4 on the list. It's not quite the worst, but god damn it, that episode really fucking ruined it. Finally, season 6 so far. So we open on Claire still being deeply traumatized, and she's now become addicted to ether because it's the only way for her to calm down when something triggers her, right? So the Revolutionary War is now growing ever closer. The Boston Tea Party has happened. There are new arrivals that have come to settle on Fraser's Ridge, and they're all Protestants, and they want to make more Protestants. They're trying to proselytize everybody and make more Protestants. Jamie's like, keep that shit to yourselves. Jamie's not with it. Jamie's like, you know what? Protestants, you do you. Us Catholics are going to do us. Let's just be on the ridge together. Let's fucking keep religion out of it. But the Protestants are like, no, we need more religion. So there's like a little bit of tension. There's a little bit of tension there, especially because a lot of the existing citizens are being converted. So we're all like, oh shit, this is good. We're going to be this now. They're going to be this kind of community now. And with Protestants and being very pious and whatnot, rumors start to circulate that Claire is a witch, because of her expertise in surgery and medicine. We remember, Claire's a surgeon, and she has knowledge about things like how to make, she figured penicillin had not been invented yet by this time, so she decided to invent it. She invented penicillin. She invented ether to use as anesthesia. Excuse me, anesthesia, there we go, sorry, that's the word, anesthesia. But the people are seeing this as witchcraft because they don't understand it. I think that's kind of the theme of this season, is just rumors, the power of mob mentality and rumors. After a dysentery epidemic breaks out, Claire falls deathly ill, though actually it was under suspicious circumstances because she did not have dysentery. She had a different ailment. So there's like some some foul play suspected here by a young girl named Malva. Malva is the daughter of that main guy that's a Protestant trying to convert everybody Protestant. And Claire takes her on as an apprentice to be a like an assistant for her medicine, to do the anesthesia and stuff. I keep wanting to call it anesthesis. That's not the word. So Malva gets real creepy. I got creepy ass vibes from this girl from the fucking first day. From like the moment she fucking started, like opened her damn mouth. I'm like, this bitch is gonna do some crazy shit later. And she did. And she did while Claire was ill. She decided to like push up on Jamie and make it seem like, oh, Jamie's trying to like get at her. Not true. Turns out she's fucking all kinds of dudes. She was getting around. She was fucking all kinds of dudes and she got pregnant, and then she tried to say, oh, it's Jamie's baby. And like, it like wasn't, but it didn't matter that it wasn't. It didn't matter that Claire believed Jamie because the rumors got started and everybody else believed it. And then Malva up and mysteriously gets murdered. She got her throat slit and the baby died too. And now all the settlers think it was Claire, but it wasn't. And that is where we left off. That was the last episode we saw. So honestly, this season, disappointing so far because everything I just told you was in 7 episodes. You remember earlier on in one of the earlier seasons, I told you all kinds of shit that happened, and then I told you it was 7 episodes. That was the pacing of this season is just so off compared to the rest of this show. And all of the other seasons, like it was just, they crammed so much shit, so much plot, so much narrative into 14 episodes, whereas now we're halfway through on this one and barely anything's happened. So I'm gonna put this one as a solid number 6. It's still too soon to tell for sure, because like I said, it's only halfway done, but it's not looking good, folks. So that is my ranking. These are my rankings of all the seasons. At the very least, you should at least watch the first 5 seasons, and I will let you know. I will follow up on season 6, but this is a great show, especially the first few seasons. They're so good, and I really recommend watching it. And that is Throw It Back, y'all.